The movie follows a brilliant medical student who gets drawn into a deadly game with his new colleagues. They soon start committing murders and other heinous acts, but the authorities are unknown about this. The story opens up as Dr. Ted Gray, a top-of-the-class graduate from Harvard Medical School, shares a romantic moment with his fiancée, Gwen. However, she is annoyed that he has to leave for 3 months as he is now about to go away for his further studies. In the next scene, Ted arrives at the Metropolitan University Medical Center, an institute with an elite pathology residency program. He is promptly greeted by a fellow resident, Ben, and the two join a class conducted by the head pathologist, Dr. Morris. After the class ends, Dr. Morris introduces Ted to Jake Gallo, a rising star pathologist who once single-handedly helped the FBI solve a family murder. But despite Ted's accomplishments, Jake doesn't seem to be impressed at all. In the next class, all the students gather for autopsy training. Upon looking at their subject, the body of an 11-year-old, Jake promptly announces that the cause of death was kidney failure. However, Ted steps forward and confidently says that the boy died due to an asthma attack. Taking his analysis one step further, Ted does a psychological dissection of the body. He guesses that the boy might have been a victim of bullying and that he was ridiculed for his obese body. Furthermore, he adds that the obesity might have been caused by the regular intake of asthma drugs. Unable to take the bullying any longer, the boy stopped taking the medications, which eventually resulted in his demise. This detailed answer makes Julian, another student in the group, jealous of Ted's sharp mind. As time goes on, Ted begins to take an interest in Jake's creepy group. So much so that he even slowly begins to suck up to them. This eventually pays off, as one day, Jake invites Ted to join his gang for a drinking session later. That evening, the two men join the rest of the group at a bar. It is then revealed that Julian and Jake are in a relationship. One of the residents in the group, Catherine, asks who they would kill if given the chance. Although Ted says the idea of killing people is immoral, he adds that humans don't need a motive to kill because it's a natural instinct for them. Gazing at the response of the people gathered at the table, it becomes obvious that Julian is highly intrigued by Ted. The social gathering continues the next night when Ted joins Jake and his group, who seem to be having the time of their lives. Jake escorts Ted to a shady brothel where they enter by bribing the guard. They then enter a house dimly lit by a red light. But Jake soon becomes overwhelmed when he sees an old woman being used as an escort. This horrendous scene, combined with all the drinking, makes him throw up and he ends up passing out. The scene then shifts to the next day as Ted arrives in the pathology lab where all the students are gearing up to conduct a new autopsy. To his horror, when the corpse is revealed, Ted is shocked to see that it belongs to the same security guard they encountered last night at the gate of the brothel. Overwhelmed, he excuses himself to the locker room while the others continue without him. That night, Jake takes Ted to an abandoned underground section of their hospital. Inside a room, the dead body of the security guard is placed on a surgery table. Enraged, Ted accuses Jake of killing the guard, and surprisingly, the latter accepts. He justifies his actions by saying the guard was a criminal. Furthermore, he reveals that the elderly woman in the brothel was the security guard's mother. Jake then challenges Ted to find out the cause of his death, but the latter is not interested in playing such games. He instead calls Jake a serial killer before storming away. Later that night, Ted calls Jake, inquiring why he entrusted him with this secret. But Jake flips the narrative on Ted and reveals that Ted's fingerprints and other samples are all over the place too. On top of this, Jake claims that Ted wants to take part in his game, which is why he will never spill the information to the police. The next day, Ted delves deeper into the case of the security guard and approaches Jake with the final verdict. The guard died due to nitric acid poisoning, not potassium cyanide. He adds that the chemical was mixed with flavored beer. Impressed, Jake gives Ted an invitation to join their group, which he accepts. The next morning, Julian approaches Ted and hands him his first assignment. He is directed to a certain room in the hospital where the target is a criminal who murdered his wife and both kids. The man also tried to kill himself with his gun, but failed. The next day, Ted gets dressed as a nurse and goes to the target's room. He injects a substance into his ear, killing him on the spot. Seeing Ted feel guilty, Jake assures him that it is normal to feel this way on the first day. Afterwards, Ted joins the rest of the team in the underground room where the deceased man's body is also present. There, they smoke and a high Ted watches on as the others playfully mutilate and dissect the body. A few days later, Julian's turn arrives and she asks Jake to help her kill the target. She takes him in front of a shabbily kept house where they notice an obese man coming out of the gate. She reveals that the man is her father, who used to frequently molest her when she was a kid. This is why she wants to punish him. Enraged by this revelation, Ted jumps on board with the plan, and the duo ventures towards the home to kill the man. There, Julian and Ted befriend the man and offer him a recreational substance to smoke. The obese man happily takes the substance, unaware that it is a canister of liquid nitrogen. Soon enough, it freezes his organs, rendering him immobile. Julian takes this opportunity to bash his chest repeatedly with a crowbar, shattering all his organs. After committing this horrific act, Julian and Ted have sexual intercourse. The following night, the group gathers at their usual base and checks the body to figure out the cause of death. Seeing the body's condition, Jake becomes suspicious as he knows Julian is capable of such brutality. Later on, Jake approaches Ted privately and reminds him to play fair. Surprisingly, he also reveals that Julian's father is still alive and well. The revelation leaves Ted shocked as he realizes they killed an innocent man the other night. Despite this, his relationship with Julian grows deeper and they have regular intercourse. In the following weeks, the game continues as the group members kill several people to test each other with various creative murder methods, seeking the perfect crime. A few days later, Ted finally meets Gwen after a long time. That afternoon, she reveals that she's finally going to move in with him in a different city, as she can take her bar exam from there. Not wanting her to know about all the things he has been doing behind her back, Ted keeps a straight face and pretends to be happy. Days later, they return to the city together. However, things get off to a rocky start as Gwen immediately notices a bong in Ted's room. She angrily asks about it, thinking he has become an addict. But Ted lies to her, saying he's holding it for friends who want to quit smoking. That evening, the two get dressed and head to a party organized by the university where they meet Jacob and the group. During the party, Julian keeps her gaze fixed on Ted, and Jake notices it. He makes a scene at the party, telling Julian that she belongs to him, but she coldly walks away. That night, Ted gets a call from Jake to urgently come to their underground morgue. However, when he reaches the spot, he is horrified to see a drunk and blood-stained Jake dancing among several dead bodies. It turns out Jake murdered 3 women for no apparent reason. Seemingly drunk and jealous, Jake holds Ted on the edge of a cleaver and asks him to guess how the women were killed. Scared that he might face the same fate as the women, Ted agrees to play the game. Thankfully, he guesses their causes of death correctly, which impresses Jake very much. He then lets Ted go back to his home. The following day, Ted tells Jake that he wants to quit their sick little game once and for all. However, he doesn't realize Jake is more twisted than he could imagine. Jake starts talking about Gwen, stating she should attend one of the meetings. Hearing this, Ted gets scared and quickly apologizes and takes back his request to leave the game. Later that night, Ted heads to the underground morgue alone and inspects the place. The following night, the group gathers at the morgue for their meeting. It is now Jake's turn to bring the victim. All 4 group members show up except for Ted and Julian. However, when Jake uncovers the corpse which they will be analyzing today, everyone is left speechless. The corpse turns out to be none other than Julian's. Jake then ominously orders one of the group members to begin the autopsy. It is then revealed that last night when Ted visited the morgue, he tampered with the gas lines. And just as one of the group members lights a fire for his cigarette, the gas leak causes the entire room to be engulfed in flames. The following morning, Ted arrives at work acting like he does not know about what happened. Dr. Morris tells him about the explosion and mentions that the bodies of 4 students were discovered, including Julian, who has been identified. Hearing this, Ted realizes that someone made it out alive from the basement, and he suspects it might be Jake. Scared, he tries contacting his girlfriend, but she doesn't notice the call. With no other option, he rushes to his apartment. On the other hand, an alive and well Jake arrives at Ted's apartment. He rings the bell and Gwen opens the door. The scene then shifts to Ted finally arriving home. He discovers his girlfriend lying on the bed. Unfortunately, it's too late as he realizes she is dead. The next morning, Ted goes straight to work and starts dissecting his girlfriend in the pathology room. After examining her body thoroughly, he notes down his diagnosis to inform the police and her family. The next evening, Ted is still busy in the lab doing his work, but when everyone else departs, leaving him alone, Jake sneaks on him. With one swift blow to the head, Jake knocks down Ted unconscious. Shortly after that, Ted awakens in an undisclosed location with Jake reading Gwen's autopsy results. He is furious that everything in the report is inaccurate and his sublime work of killing Gwen has been passed as a simple murder. Regardless, he is also happy because he has finally won since Ted failed to figure out the cause of Gwen's death. Hearing this, Ted starts laughing and says that he wrote a false autopsy so that he could lure out Jake. In reality, he knows the actual cause of death. Just then, one of Ted's friends from the college, Ben, sneaks in and gags Jake with a chloroform-soaked cloth. Then, Ted begins to explain how Jake killed Gwen while recreating the same scenario with Jake. After making sure Gwen was incapacitated by chloroform, Jake made sure she was still conscious. Ted believes Jake then injected her with potassium cyanide before dropping nitroglycerin on her tongue. This would have slowly drifted Gwen towards her death in 7 minutes. In the final scene, Ted and Ben repeat the process with Jake's body. Ted starts operating on his body while Jake is still conscious and can feel every bit of the pain. The story closes as Ted grabs a massive pair of scissors and severs a major blood vessel in Jake's body. This horrifying movie teaches us that ambition unchecked by morality can lead to a horrifying descent into darkness and crime.